we we talked about having a conversation about oxytocin. So let's talk a little bit. Let's give the people a little bit of background on why oxytocin matters to what we each individually do in the world. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what you've studied and what you know?
All right, let's talk about oxytocin. I love oxytocin. It has two sides of the coins. Now we kind of like understanding the other side. Today we're going to only speak one side, which is the pro-social. So maybe we can talk about that on our next life, because I think there's so much that we can explore. One thing that is very interesting about oxytocin is that it's almost like a evolutionary neurotransmitter as well as a hormone, which means that it's on the brain and as well in the blood. It's the only neurotransmitter and hormone that had that kind of that signature to it. And it's very primitive, and it's kind of linked back as a mutation when society moved from living in caves by themselves to starting to create society and human connection. So it goes back to the beginning of how do we connect in general as humans. But as you know, that one of the main elements for oxytocin is to help on the process of childbirthing as well as breastfeeding. And we talked before, and we're like, all right, so if that if mothers can induce the production of that neuropeptide, um, can we induce that after we stop breastfeeding? Remember we were talking about that?
Yes.
So I'm like, that's pretty awesome. So can we do it? And yes, we can. And that's one thing that it would be that is awesome, because with the amount of stress that we have around us, sometimes connection becomes an active thing for us to do, which generates even more stress. So, how can we kind of go around that? Just the idea that you are thinking about breastfeeding, even though you're not, but you wanted to increase oxytocin. Because, oh, sorry, let's go 1 second, let's go one step back. So, oxytocin will slow down the activity in the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that makes you um, sharp in the sense of like something's going to happen to me next, right? The stress like gives you anxiety. It will connect back to past memories of fear and anything that happened to you that create that imprinting, right? That almost like for people that are on the extreme side for the PTSDs. So the amygdala is going to go back right to that. So once you have oxytocin rushing to your system, the activity in that part of the brain will slow down. And another thing that's super interesting is that the activity on your prefrontal cortex, which is what we are using right now, is activated right now for me to argument this with you and for you to be paying attention to me, also slows down. Why do we want that to slow down, right? So I'm going to tell you that. So another thing that happens is that it increases the activity on your primitive brain, which is connected to deep intuition. But only you can have the access to deep intuition if your amygdala also decrease the activity. No? Okay, so now you kind of got the oh yeah, and why do we want to slow down activity on the frontal cortex? Because the frontal cortex is very judgmental, right? So if you are in the process of bonding and involving pro-social attributes, um, you you don't want um, big levels of judgment because that also requires the process of forgiveness. If it's something that, if it is with someone that you have been before, with our partners, with our children, that many roadblocks there. And forgiveness is one of the things that kind of the frontal cortex help you to judge yes or no. So we kind of like created this stage, right, for us to embrace oxytocin, or to experience the oxytocin in our bodies for bro bonding. Okay, so let's go back to the breastfeeding. Right, years has passed. I mean, my children now are 8 and 5, and I'm like, how can, as a mother, and as a mother, how can I induce the more release of oxytocin now that I'm not breastfeeding anymore? One way to do it is actually to start imagining that you are breastfeeding. That process itself is start creating the release of oxytocin in the whole system. And therefore, for the next like few hours, they say that it's around 6 to 8 hours, you have that rush in your body. It's just this simple. It's by using your mind to induce the memory of what that felt like. And sometimes I do it and I actually like start like feeling this heat here. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is it milk gonna come out of it? Yeah. No, it doesn't really happen. Maybe with some people it does. But the effects of that is really amazing. And then if you do that with your children, you can actually, because oxytocin is something that you actually get from eye to eye contact, connection, as well as touch. So if you do that with them, you actually increase oxytocin on them as well. And I use this as a hack. Why? Because I want to precondition them to learn how to release oxytocin as well. Does that make sense?
It does. So what do you do? How do you I can understand as an adult, you can think about that and you can develop a hack for yourself or a cue that
Yep.
would remind you to have that memory or to bring yourself into that state. How do you teach a child to do that, to bring themselves into a state where oxytocin can be released?
You don't teach. You simulate that, because oxytocin, it's male also that you create, right? That the child perceives. Remember, this is happening before consciousness,
Mm.
right? It's like, that's why I love physiology, because it's like, how can we stimulate our children, ourselves? Again, with all the stress we have, we need to have certain tools to kind of help us and help our children to come to recover fast, right? So I think of as oxytocin as one of those tools. So just by the act of being with them, that's why a lot of like they in hospitals with premature babies, where it's my background. So the eye contact, the skin to skin therapy. Have you heard, you know about this one, right? That makes the child grow. That's mainly because they increase the oxytocin on their bodies, right? Stimulating that, and that stimulate a bunch of cascade on other hormones. That one of them is hormone of the growth for the child to thrive. So is eye to eye contact and skin to skin touch. By doing that, you are increasing the oxytocin release on this child's body.
So you're saying that, so for instance, your 8-year-old, if
Yeah.
you were in a moment where you're like, we are not connecting on this, they're not understanding me, or I'm getting mad and I shouldn't be mad, but I am, you are able to, through touch and contact and closeness,
Mm-hmm.
bring yourself back into a state where you feel oxytocin from the bond with your child that also then transfers to them so that they can also begin to regulate themselves.
No. Because when the child or we are in fever of stress, there's really not much you can do at that time and not allowing the body to release. But You should do that when they wake up, before they go to school,
Mm.
right? So you're building that oxytocin when they are not on the fire of stress.
Ah.
So whenever they are on the fire of stress, they will recover faster. So let's say if they will have a stress moment of like, I don't know, 2, 3 minutes, hopefully you're going to start bringing that down to one, because the body has that precondition. And then the interesting thing is that oxytocin combined with dopamine create cues, right? I think we were talking about this before. So the what is very interesting is that this combination that you're generating in your own body, in the body of your children, it creates this precondition um, that is really linked to addiction,
Mm.
right? So when you have oxytocin and dopamine together, uh, y- they generate habits. So it's like the combo that you kind of need to generate habits. So I'm saying that because if you can create that predisposition in the child, you are creating cues that will create the habit of them perhaps not even going to that level of stress. Because the more that you create habits in the body based on this method of like addiction, the more the body will want that.
Mhm.
So if we are, have this habit of being with the children and giving them this cue of like, okay, this is what I'm giving you, oxytocin, oxytocin, oxytocin. You create the precondition for them to release even more. The same way with everything else that truly happens, especially when we go to the extreme of like, hardcore addictions, not to kind of bring that here, but I always see the brain or us perceiving the world that way. So if we can create addictions for those things, we also should create addiction for things that are that creates pro well-being, results on the experience of us. So if you can create that predisposition of in the children and in yourself, perhaps they are not going to go into that level of stress.
Okay, I light bulbs just going off here for me because it's not that I didn't know that. It's that I misunderstood you because I have, and I think a lot of people have this tendency to feel like everything that happens in the body, whatever you do, it happens right now. We forget that things have a very long tail. And go back, you said that. You said when oxytocin is released, it's there in your system for 6 to 8 hours. That makes so much sense I think about what you just said, that if you do that in the morning, then the rest of the day is going to be easier for the child to, not overreact, or if they overreact, to come back down, and for yourself as well. So that I think that's the piece of it and I've been hearing that pattern in other things that I've been listening to lately, and things I'm just observing in my life and people that I know, thinking about how we just always assume like, oh, I ate that for lunch an hour ago, so that's why this is happening to me right now in my body. But that isn't how the body works. Like, some things happen. If you cut yourself, you will bleed right away.
Yes.
But there are also things that happen that have a very long tail, and that really does apply so much in the work that I do as a lactation consultant. I think that people, because we've been culturally conditioned
Yes.
to think of breastfeeding as food, we just think of breastfeeding as the transfer of food from one place to another, and that when that feeding is done, the feeding is over, and everything that happened only has to do with that transfer of nutrition. And that's not true at all with the way that feeding happens. So with breastfeeding, we understand a lot about it and about the oxytocin releases that happen during breastfeeding. But what we really want to do with that information is not only impart that to people who are breastfeeding, but people who have finished breastfeeding, people
Mhm.
who are not breastfeeding, who are feeding a different way. We have so much knowledge that we can give to people that would help them to really, I guess, advance those pro-social behaviors when breastfeeding is not happening. Again, because it already is over, or, maybe it's years later. There are so many things that we can do. If we just took it with feeding and we extrapolated that out into the lifetime, making food with love, serving food with love, eating together in a group, all of those things could be pro-social oxytocin releasing behaviors. Again, with that long tail. I think that's the way I'm going to have to remember this forever, is that oxytocin, it's not only that it's released right now. It's
Mhm.
it's going to be released for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, yeah. And the interesting thing is that it works the same or reverse. So if you're releasing cortisol, it also has a cascade of events that it will take some time for your brain to, it goes to the, all the systems that once you go back to your brain that say, hey, we need to shut down the release of cortisol, it takes another period of time for the whole body to understand and say, hey guys, all right, let's slow down. That cue was wrong, because mainly the release of cortisol we have now are not true, but the brain and the physiology is not perceiving. There's not a bear hurting, hunting us anymore, right? But it, for the body perspective, is still experienced as it is a bear or a tiger. So it happens exactly the same or reverse. So we do need to have what I call, well, it's not what I call, so it's a scientific term that calls salutogenesis, which is the study of health, right? Rather than just concentrate on what are reducing our ability to be healthy. How can we just explore things that improve our health? And so oxytocin, the elements, the combination of oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, and we can go the next call we can talk about this. But I think we need to change the mindset a little bit, and start you asked me. So do we have the child or ourselves when we are in anger and frustration and a high level of stress? And I'm like, no, you do that in other periods when you're not. So you create the predisposition for that to be something that the body will um, ask you as a cue, as a trigger to continue releasing.
This is wow, just
It's
this is
fast,
huge.
isn't it?
It really is. So, you were talking about other hormones, and neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin and cortisol. Do we know as much about how those act in babies? Is it the same throughout the lifetime, or is it different in babies than it is in children versus adults? What do we know about that?
Such a good question. We don't know much because the brain is so plastic.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, like for example, I think in our other call, we should be talking about the other side of oxytocin, because all the research until like 2005 2010 is all about the pro behavior, right? The moral, the trustworthy, you know uh, uh, benefits or consequences of oxytocin.
Mhm.
But now all of a sudden, which relates back to theory of the mind and so many other things that we can go into here. But now there's a lot of research that are proving things are not so beneficial. So maybe we can hold that for our next call. And
Yes.
if you wanted to join us, and then the next one we can talk about the brain's plasticity as well, and how to actually use stress to induce dopamine and serotonin, right? And so we can start understanding this piano, this instrument that our body is, and start playing it according to how we want to experience connection and this beautiful place that we are. A lot of people are, it's like, oh, it's so hard, everything's so hard. It's like this is the best time that we're living because we know so much, even though we don't know, you know. We and the interesting thing about the brain is like when we get to a certain point of like understanding um how this mechanism of the structure of the brain happens and all of those millions, trillions of things that happen at the same time, the brain will take itself. It's like, and then you got to go back to stage one, right? So it's a continuous, you know, kind of engaging and learning and catching up with like peer review science and kind of adapting that to us, to women and mothers, and raising culture. So maybe our next call we can go to that.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think there's so much about this, obviously, that could be tied into everything about how we live as human beings, but specifically as parents. Because, what you were just describing there is this interplay of how parenting actually happens. It's not a matter of putting your child in a bubble and never allowing them to experience anything stressful, but it's also about protecting them from certain things and exposing them to certain things so that they can learn and have that adaptability and flexibility too. And you're right, like it's always been sort of a roll of the dice that either you got that nuance correct and your kids turned out fine, or maybe you overdid it in one way or another and bad things came out of that. Like we were always winging it. And we don't maybe understand every single thing now, but we do understand more. So there's definitely things we can do to improve the possibility that we're getting it right, right?
Yeah, something I do feel like mothering is a technology. I feel that uh, we, with our conversations, we should aim to give the power back to parenting
Mhm.
because there's a lot of social norms that we follow even without being conscious. And
Yeah.
I think I believe that there is some power that have been taken from parents, from mothers, because we and even with the process of oxytocin, if you go back to this element of shutting down frontal cortex, shutting down or not shutting down, just decreasing some electricity there, for lack of better words, and increasing the 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 the, the activities on the primitive brain that doesn't rely on this process of logic, which means that you are going down into intuition, which means that you are going down to the deeper um, voice or the deeper desires that you have, and that being, right? It's genetically connected to you. You guys exchange a lot of cells that lives in each other's body until they are like much, much, much older. Which means that it makes me feel like, wait, so you actually know much more about how to raise these children. And then once you kind of like come out of that hour, like, that rush of oxytocin, then you can use your frontal cortex and be like, hmm, based on that I just felt, like, how do I want to act on this situation now with my children? Like, how do I want them to experience the world? How do I want how do I want society to be? You know, like, I truly believe we are the creators of society because we are the ones that are bringing these people to the world right now. It's like, sometimes I think it's like, when does it like turn around on us? You know?
These are
So
such good questions. We have allowed technology to advance at such a rapid pace that we don't always think about what the downstream effects are going to be, and really what the deeper effects are. We take something as simple in breastfeeding as breastfeeding or pumping, and we've seen research that shows where they've done functional MRIs of people who are feeding their baby at the breast versus people who are pumping, and each of those activities activates different parts of the brain. So people think of them as being the same, but they are not the same clearly if they're activating different parts of the brain,
yes.
different purposes. And there's so many things, culturally, like you said, that we are accepting as norms, ways of thinking and ways of doing things that we should be talking about a lot more. So that's why I'm so glad that we're starting this conversation, this is not the end. This is just the beginning.
Yes, 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 for sure. Like, I also want to tell you this story, but maybe on the next call because we are reaching the 30-minute mark about like, you know, how in the hospitals, women that breastfeed together, oh my gosh, like it's something else. It really is something else what happened on those rooms. So I would love to talk to you about that and the creativity that happens and the release of traumas and the release of stress just for the fact that those women were together in this specific situation, with like many of them already comes with trauma and how much of the healing happens there. So I'd love for us to kind of like explore that on our next go as well.
That sounds great. We have a lot to talk about in the future.
Yes, and again, you, I'm writing now on about memory and also how going back to our primitive brain brings you so much more like of these innate memories of the technology of mothering, you know? So that's very interesting. How can we modulate future behaviors and on ourselves, in our children, so we can, so there's so many elements that we can explore.
Yes, for sure. And there is hope. There is so
Mhm.
much that we know, and there's so much that we can do and that we can change. So
Yeah.
let's keep doing that. Let's keep having this conversation and just really, really glad that we started this.
Me too. Thank you so much. I am so grateful for to be in this amazing community here, and especially for you that has been so like kind with your time and kind of helping me around. Because coming from like always being in the mind as well, it's kind of interesting to do this conversation. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for being here with me. I really appreciate it, and we'll definitely be back. Everybody, thank you for joining us and listening in this morning. And we'll post the replay so that if you missed part of it, you can listen again. It'll be on Substack, and I'm going to put it on my Evolve Lactation podcast, so you and everybody will be able to find it there too.
Yeah,
So. Thank you again, Emilia. Is there anything you want everybody to know about how to find you? Just anything you'd like them to look at or read?
Substack.
That's
Yeah, yeah, just in the
great.
community here. That's what I am because like I just love writing, so I'm putting all my passion there.
Me
And
too.
then I would just say if people have questions or if they want us to talk about something specific, to let us know, and so we can kind of explore the topics they want as well.
Well said. Well, thank you, my friend. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon. Take
Bye.
care.